Howdy. We went over a lot of information in class today, too much information, I think, in hindsight, about how to run correlations, t-tests, and we actually didn't get to ANOVAs in SPSS. So I'm going to make a video on each one of how you run the test, interpret the output, and then how you would put it into an APA table. So if I am in eCampus and I want to access the data file that we used in class and have been using, I'm going to click on Student Resources, Research Project Resources, and remember, you'll either need SPSS on your computer or you'll need to go to the computer lab. Every computer in the computer lab has SPSS on it. Click on all the way down to the bottom, Sample SPSS Dataset. And I already have SPSS open on my computer. Close my output real quick. So what you'll see open up is the SPSS file. So the first thing I want to practice running is a correlation, and I'm just going to go back through the ones that we did in class today. So if I want to run a correlation, I want to go to Analyze, Correlate, Bivariate, click on Bivariate, and then I'm going to look at, we looked at in class, the teacher mean and the student mean. If you click and hit Shift, you can highlight multiple variables at one time and move them over. That's helpful if you're moving a lot of variables at one time. So I'm going to move teacher mean and student mean over into my window. For analysis, I want to click on, let me do that again, I'm going to click on Options and check means and standard deviations, because I want my output to show me what the means and standard deviations are for those variables, and click Continue. And then I'm going to click OK. Okay, so here comes my output. So the first table I get is a descriptive statistics table, so that's just the mean and standard deviation and then how many observations for each of my variables, teacher mean and student mean. The next table is the correlations table. So remember, I'm going to have a row for each variable. I'm also going to have a column for each variable, because the correlations compares each variable to each variable. So in this case, it's going to compare teacher mean to itself. It's also going to compare student mean to itself. Notice that those values returned there for the correlation coefficient is 1, because that's a perfect correlation, because it's the same data. Remember, your correlation coefficient, or the Pearson R is also another thing it's sometimes called, or sometimes it's just called the R value, is going to be a number between -1 and +1. Remember, a -1 would be a perfect negative correlation, which means as one variable decreases, the other decreases, and then the perfect positive would be as one goes up, the other goes up. So in this case, I have a positive relationship, is words you could say to explain this, between teacher mean and student mean. So that means that generally, if the teacher mean was high, the student mean also was high, or as teacher mean went up, student mean also went up. So my Pearson correlation coefficient, or my R value, it's the same thing, in this case is 0.449. So that tells me how strongly correlated my variables are. Remember, if they were perfectly correlated, exactly the same, it would be 1. So this is kind of a moderate correlation. There is a relationship here. The asterisks tell me that the relationship is statistically significant. So I have 2 asterisks, which for the correlation table SPSS tells you, it gives you a footnote at the bottom of the table that says this correlation is significant at the 0.01 level. We can ignore what two-tailed means for now. So I know that this correlation is significant at the 0.01 level. If you look here underneath the correlation coefficient, it said sig. Sig is short for significance, which is the same thing as a p-value, which, remember, p-value is the probability that something is not due to sampling error, that something happened by chance. So my p-value, you can see, is 0.000. Remember, any p-value less than 0.05 is statistically significant. So if you run a test, like for the t-test and the ANOVA, SPSS won't give you an asterisk next to your number to tell you whether or not it's statistically significant, but you can look at the p-value, or the sig, significance value, and if it's less than 0.05, then that is statistically significant. Okay, so let's talk about how I would take the information from my SPSS table and put that in an APA format table in Microsoft Word. So I'm going to open up, and there I already had it open. Let me erase this. So we have to think about it for later. So I'm going to open up the table that we had in class today, which, remember, this is saved in eCampus, so you can refer to this table as well. I'm also going to put the output in eCampus. So my table, this one's already done for us, so I'm looking at the correlation between teacher mean, so there's my first variable, and student mean. There's my second variable. The variables go across the top and then as rows as well. These are numbered in this case. You don't necessarily have to number the variables, but in this table they're numbered. So the table looks very familiar in terms of how it's set up with rows and columns to the way that it comes out in SPSS. The only number that you have to put in this table, now kind of here's a difference, and some people asked in class, why don't we put this 0.449, why don't we put an R value here as well? And my answer is you could do that if you wanted to, but APA is all about kind of efficiency and using the least amount of characters, meaning letters and numbers, as possible. So this is not incorrect to do this. It would not be incorrect if you filled in your ones as well. But it's just kind of best practice when you're writing a research report. APA prefers that you only put the information one time, and APA actually prefers that you put it in the left column. So we're only going to put the R value, 0.449, the correlation coefficient, we're only going to put that in the first column. And then we're going to star that twice, just like I see over here in SPSS, to indicate the statistical significance. Okay, now I want to go back to SPSS. If I click on my output, so I'll just get rid of this. Remember, it doesn't matter if I can see the output window or not. As long as I can find the word analyze or find that menu, I can run another one. So we're going to run the other correlation that we ran in class, which is the correlation between overall tech use and tech availability. So remember, I'm going to go to Analyze, Correlate, Bivariate. I'm going to click on these two variables. Those are, remember, SPSS saves the last thing that I did. I'm going to kick those out. And I'm going to put in, just so happens that it's the next two, overall tech use and availability of tech use. So how much technology did they have available in their classroom? We talked about this in class, but you guys told me that we would expect there to be a positive correlation between these two variables. Just logically, you would expect that if you have quality technology use, that you have technology available in the classroom. It saves my options, means and standard deviation, so I don't have to click that again. I just wanted to show you that SPSS saves whatever the last setting you chose. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to scoot this over a little bit so I can see it a little bit more. So you can see same tables as last time. I just have a different variable here. So I have two different variables here in my means and standard deviations and the number of observations for each one. The table is exactly the same. I just have different numbers, so I can tell in this case. Again, here's my correlation coefficient, or my R value, of 0.444. So again, I have a positive, moderate, so it's, it's not 0.75, but so this is kind of a moderate positive relationship. So generally, as quality of technology use goes up, availability also goes up. And then again, my asterisks tell me that this is significant at the 0.01 level. So I'm going to get rid of this table, or the data set, and we're going to fill this into the table. So your table 2 was blank. You've probably filled it in to some degree by now. But so table 2 is a correlation between, and I'm just going to say overall quality of technology use. Sometimes your title is a little more descriptive than your variable names, and technology availability. So you just put the names of your variables in the title. I already had those from before, but if this was blank, you just also put your names of your variables in your rows. You can also put them in your columns. Same variables, just like the table above and just like the table in SPSS. And then remember, we're not going to put anything for our perfect correlations, and we're only going to put one R value. In this case, it's 0.444 right there, my Pearson correlation coefficient. And I'm going to put those two asterisks to indicate that this is statistically significant at the 0.01 level. And then the note at the bottom of my table is going to let folks know the level of significance. So that's how you run, interpret, and then put into a table a correlation between two variables.